Leg locks have been put in the MMA spotlight due to some dramatic finishes and some athletes building careers using leg locks. However, they've also resulted in some devastating knockouts when the leg entries fail. So the goal of this video is to discuss the best way to incorporate leg locks into your MMA game. First, we're going to talk about if they even work in MMA and if they're even worth studying. Then we're going to talk about some general ways leg locks will improve your game. And then 3, we're going to talk about what I believe is the best entry to use for MMA purposes. Before we dive into the video, I wanted to give a quick update on the channel. As most of you know, we gave away a $50 BJJ Fanatics gift card when we reached 1,000 subscribers. Christopher was the winner of this giveaway, and I reached out to him, but unfortunately he hasn't replied for a couple weeks. So I decided that the best course of action would be to pick a new winner, right? So I took the same list of people, I removed Christopher, and I did the same equals rand between equation to pick a random winner. And Jared Kirby is the new winner. So Jared, congratulations. I will reach out to you on YouTube in the comments section, and hopefully we'll connect through Instagram so I can get you that gift card. So now let's answer the question, do leg locks work in MMA? And honestly, at this point, I think it's pretty hard to argue that they don't work. We've seen people like Ryan Hall build their entire strategy behind heel hooks, and they're constantly trying to spin into the legs to entangle their opponent. And there are dangers that are associated with these entries, but a lot of times the athletes who base their game on leg locks tend to have different pathways that ensure that if the leg entry fails, they end up on top of that scramble. And that transitions us nicely into what I believe is one of the benefits of leg locks in MMA, is that it allows you to win scrambles. Now, like I said, a lot of the people that are using leg locks as a primary strategy tend to end up on top of the scramble when that leg lock fails. And when we're talking about winning scrambles, what it comes down to is who gets their head and hips higher than the other person. So if we're looking at this situation here, when you're following up on a failed leg lock, the most important thing is that you're focusing on getting your head and your hips higher than your opponent's. Now, if they lose that battle for head height and they end up on the bottom of the scramble, entering into the legs is a great way to kind of reboot the system and keep your opponent on the defensive. Also, there's going to be scramble situations that ensue after takedowns. A lot of times there's falling body weight and people are off balance, right? So it's a good opportunity to capitalize and threaten your opponent. Very common defense to leg locks is people want to run, and when they run, they expose their back. So one thing that I think is common amongst people who use them successfully in MMA is that they're not closed-minded to the fact that they don't work sometimes. And sometimes it's better to end up on top of the scramble, to take your opponent's back, rather than trying to hold on to a leg lock that has a small chance of success. Another way leg locks can benefit your MMA game is survival. If you get rocked, you can throw up a submission and threaten your opponent's legs to put them on the defensive and allow yourself to recover. They're also just a great way to counter, right? If your opponent is attacking your leg, a lot of times in the heat of the battle, they forget about their own, and it leaves a very easy counter leg lock attempt. You can also use leg locks to counter other submissions like omoplatas, so you go from being on the defensive to finishing the fight. So far, everything we've discussed has kind of assumed that you have a background knowledge of leg locks. If you're hitting leg locks in transition, if you're shooting a leg entry when you're dazed, it's because it's an instinctual response. And honestly, if that's you probably shouldn't be watching this video, right? Like, you probably know all of this already. So I think the people that this video is for are people who are primarily maybe strikers, and they do some grappling, obviously, because they do MMA, but they don't have an extensive knowledge of leg locks. So how could you use leg locks in that case to improve your game? Now, if this is you, I think the primary way leg locks are going to fit into your game is as kind of a Hail Mary at the end of a round, right? Like, you'll sit for a heel hook with 20 seconds left in the round, hoping that you finish the fight. Now, it's kind of the same idea as throwing a crazy strike at the end of a round. If it lands, great. If it doesn't land, you put yourself in a situation where you don't have to suffer the consequences for minutes. Because we don't have extensive knowledge of leg locks, and we don't have the ability to end up on top of scrambles, to take our opponents back if the leg entry fails, we can't be going for leg locks with minutes left on the clock, because if they don't work, we put ourselves in a very bad situation. So now that we understand how leg locks are going to fit into our game, let's discuss the specifics of how that entry is going to look, and it's going to involve the fence. Like we talked about, a common defense to leg locks, or just grappling in general, is for your opponent to run away from you. But the fence prevents that. So a lot of times you'll see grapplers like Gary Tonin dragging their partner to the fence to prevent them from running. But at the same time, you also see his opponent bringing themselves to the fence because they use the fence to stand up. So a lot of times we'll end up in this situation where we're standing against the fence. And this, I believe, is a great opportunity to enter into the legs. Now, we've talked about finishing the heel hook before, and I'll leave that link in the description below. But just to give a quick little rundown, we tend to use the reap to bring the knee inside the line of the hip and the toe. This allows us to get a good catch on our opponent's heel. But when it comes time to break, we like to use outside ashi because it makes their knee go to the outside of the line between the hip and the toe, which is exactly what we need to get break. The issue is this requires practice, right? It requires understanding of the position to use different ashigaramis to achieve different goals. And a lot of times people throw in the reap, which brings the knee to the inside of the line of the hip and the toes, but that allows our opponent to just roll to alleviate the pressure. But what if we put a wall that didn't allow our opponent to roll? Then they wouldn't be able to alleviate the pressure, and we would be able to get the finish. So that is exactly how we're going to use the fence. Now, it's important to understand which direction our opponent is going to spin. If we're making our opponent's knee turn to the right, that is the direction that they're going to roll. So if we allow them to roll that way, there's a chance that they can defend. But if instead we force them to roll in the direction of the fence, they're not able to, which then will allow us to get the finish. So how I believe most people should be using leg locks in MMA is with around 20 seconds left in the round, pressed against the fence, you sit for a heel hook and you force them to roll in the direction of the fence. Now, If this works, you'll finish the fight right there. If it doesn't work, you don't give your opponent enough time to make you pay for the leg lock attempt. So if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate your support, appreciate you subscribing and sharing the content. It really helps out the channel. We're gonna be launching the Patreon page on February 1st, so keep an eye out for that, and we'll see you in the next video.